Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show. It's Friday. We made it to the end of the week, right? I'm exhausted. It is 6:35. Home from work, gonna have dinner soon. And I'm gonna do a quick video for you. About a week ago, one of my viewers referred me to another channel. Said you should do a video that this guy did, which was like 10 overrated albums. So I'm like, yeah, that's a really good concept. I started watching that channel's video. I stopped in like 5 minutes. Not because it was bad. I just didn't like the direction he was going. I think he had Sgt. Pepper's, The Wall, and I think Exile on Main Street. And I'm like, this is definitely not for me. No offense. I never need to hear Sgt. Pepper's again. The Wall, song for song, is pretty imperfect, and Exile, I think, is one of the greatest albums of all time. So that's not what I would consider an overrated album. But I do have my choices for overrated albums. I just went downstairs on my racks and I just scanned right through, had some in my head instantly that I've always considered overrated. And I am going to show you 10 albums, and in some cases almost translate to artists, that I think are really, really overrated. And then I would love to know your opinion, because it's just music. And my opinion is no better than yours. But I think these really are overrated, and I'd love to know your thoughts. All right, we're going to do it in alphabetical order. Now, my very first choice, I guess it's alphabetical order. My very first choice is probably going to annoy some people, and it's by David Bowie. Now, I am a really, really big David Bowie fan. So before you attack me, I have 59 David Bowie albums. That's a pretty good selection. All of his original albums. But now I stopped buying because the deluxe reissues I just can't keep up with anymore. But anyway, when he put out his final studio album, and it was literally right when he passed away, called Black Star, I was really excited. The album took off, sold massive quantities because he passed away. And when I played it, I'm like, wow, this is so different and so uncommercial and like jazzy, not melodic, dissonant. I'm like, this is, and a lot of people said it was a really, really courageous way to end your career, because he was ending his career with Black Star. The album he did before that was The Next Day, which I thought was incredible. I loved The Next Day. In fact, when I was doing my end of year top 3 albums, The Next Day was in my top 3. So when I listened to Black Star, I was like, this album is just so different. It's really courageous. But at the end of the day, I don't really find it a very enjoyable listen. It sold massive quantities, and I remember saying, I'm going to find this thing in the used record stores by the gazillions. And I was completely wrong, because I never see this thing used. So I guess everybody who bought it loves it, or just kept it and doesn't really listen to it. I will tell you that the title track I think is really good. And then Lazarus is incredible. Oh my God, Lazarus is off the chart great. But as a listening experience, I just don't really find this a very pleasant listen. And in the scheme of all of these Bowie albums that I have, this is one that I just never really go back to. And as I was downstairs picking these CDs, I threw this thing on and I was like, yeah, it's just not an easy listen, and doesn't mean it's a bad album, but we're talking about overrated albums. And when people talk about Bowie, a lot of times they put this near the top now, and I don't think it's anywhere near the top of his album. So courageous release, but I would put David Bowie Black Star as a highly overrated album. All right, let's keep going. This is an album I always thought was overrated, and this is David Crosby and his classic solo record, If I Could Only Remember My Name. And in fact, this is a deluxe edition of it. It's got a DVD with like surround sound, I think, and other stuff. And it's a really interesting listen. Again, we're doing overrated albums. This is not a terrible album. It's just not an album that's got a lot of great songs. It's more like soundscapes, and he does all the harmony vocal type things, but at the end of the day, I don't really think it's loaded with particularly good songs in general, and I just don't think it's all that great. It's not bad, but when you look at album lists of the greatest albums of all time, you will tend to find this somewhere in there, and I don't get it. In fact, for me, David Crosby out of the four of them, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, I think he is the least. He's original, but he's the least talented as far as being a songwriter, in my opinion. You know. Now, of course, he's got great songs, Almost Cut My Hair, etc. A long time gone. I'm not, everybody's got some amazing songs, but this album, for me, overrated. Let's keep going. So I think roughly alphabetical order. I am not a big fan of the Electric Light Orchestra. I don't hate them, so I guess I wouldn't have put them in my hate video. But they just annoy the hell out of me. They really do. Something about their sound, Jeff Lynne, I know they're Beatlesque. With that said, A New World Record, and I have a couple of their albums. That one I kind of like. I kind of like Telephone Line. It's a nice song. And Do Ya is good, and Living Thin's good. So this album I can bear with. The album I believe they did after that was their magnum opus, right? The 2 LP set called Out of the Blue, which I am showing you an 8-track of. I thought that would be kind of cool to show you. Now I got this 8-track, I don't know, a year ago maybe longer. And that's the track listing. It might be in a little bit different order because it's an 8-track. I have yet to be able to get through this thing completely. I'll put it on, and I'm like, I had enough. Had enough. And this is considered like one of the all-time great albums. In fact, that influential list that I did from Popoff's book, this thing was showing up in there. I don't get it. Turn to Stone and Sweet Talking Woman. I'm not saying it doesn't have any good songs. It's got some good songs on there. But overall, man, Mr. Blue Sky, I can't get through this thing. So, for me, Electric Light Orchestra, Out of the Blue, is definitely an overrated album. I know people are going to attack me, I'm sure. That's cool. It's all opinion. Let's keep going. Here's one that I definitely want to talk about. So, we're going to be talking about Van Morrison and Astral Weeks. Don't turn your station off, please. Hear me out. I like this album a lot. I do. But this album oftentimes is like, you look at lists of the 5 greatest albums of all time, you'll find this up there. And I'm always like, what? Are you serious? It's good. But here's the deal with this album, and correct me if I'm wrong. I remember researching it or reading about it back in the day. It was very much like a jam in the studio, live jamming in the studio, and it's very much like a jazz album. And I like jazz. I'm getting more and more into jazz. But from a song structure, this is, it's not amazing songs to me. And in fact, most of these songs were done in the studio. And my understanding, the producer, Lou Merenstein, actually put this album together, even without the help or much help from Van Morrison. He had to shape these jams into these songs. I like this album. Again, I'm not saying this is a bad album. But when I'm in the mood to listen to Van Morrison, it definitely doesn't, it's not Astral Weeks. It's rare that I want to put this on. And in fact, I had a big conversation once with a guy who was a really big Van Morrison fan. And we had a conversation about Astral Weeks, saying that I said it was overrated. And I have a ton of Van Morrison, and I like Van Morrison. But I said to him, when I want to listen to Van Morrison, I put on Moondance, which is a perfect album. And Wavelength, I think, is a really underrated album. And Into the Music, and Beautiful Vision, and Avalon Sunset. And there's a bunch of them, right? It is pretty rare that I throw on Astral Weeks. And I said to him, I want you to be honest with me. When do you listen to Astral Weeks? When you listen to Van Morrison and you're such a huge fan, do you listen to Astral Weeks? And I was like, when was the last time you listened to it? He's like, 8 years ago. And I'm like, there you go. Music is about listening, not about analyzation and why is this such a great album. Do you listen to the damn thing that much? And the answer, I think, for most people is not that much. And that's why Astral Weeks is overrated. It's fine for what it is, but I don't think it's a go-to album for too many Van Morrison fans. Now, this one I'm going to try to make quick because I already have spoken about Queen a gazillion times. And I did a whole playlist, and I tortured myself. And I bought like every classic Queen album except for Queen 2, which I haven't gotten yet. And I listened to every Queen album 5 or 6 times, and then I did a whole roundup video saying, because a lot of people say Queen is the greatest band of all time, and I'm like, no, they're not even in their running. and I'm going to prove it by listening to these albums with an open mind. So basically, I could pick any of these Queen albums. Probably you'd want to choose A Night at the Opera, but if you want to do the debut album, or if you want to pick jazz, or if you want to pick News of the World, or if you want to pick A Day at the Races, or if you want to pick Sheer Heart Attack, and no, I'm missing the second one, Queen, any of their album is overrated, and certainly as a band, they're about as overrated as you could possibly get, in my opinion. But what the hell, we'll just go with A Night at the Opera. Again, some good songs, but I don't think any of these albums are excellent. I don't think any of them are 4-star albums. At best, maybe 3.5. So they are overrated. And I stick to my point that all these people who say Queen are the greatest band, or the Queen is my favorite band of all time, I will bet them, and I know I'm right, that they don't listen to their albums. They know their 8 to 10 greatest hits that you hear on the radio, on TV all the time, and that's what they're basing it on. So there you go. Let's talk about this one. This is a frustrating one. Liz Phair. I'm a fan of Liz Phair, except I like her more commercial stuff. But this album, Exile in Guyville, which was like her first album, man, this album gets rave reviews. It's always at the top of greatest albums in its time. And they say it's a song-by-song answer to Exile on Main Street. Somebody explain that to me. One thing, Exile on Main Street is a journey album. It takes you on a trip, but it's not exactly telling a story in its songs. And it's not asking questions, so I don't know what the hell these answers are. I just think it's nothing but bullshit marketing. It certainly doesn't sound anything like Exile on Main Street. And this album is really low fidelity, and it's really just okay. It's not a bad album. But I will tell you that I much prefer Liz Phair's later albums. My favorite Liz Phair album is a self-titled album, which a lot of people pissed all over because they said it was a sellout. Well, it was a sellout because it was made up of really good, catchy songs, which this album doesn't have. Liz Phair, Exile in Guyville, definitely an incredibly overrated album in my mind, and that's where you're going right there, Liz. All right, let us keep going. Let's keep going. Now, this one is going to piss off a lot of people, and I don't want it to piss off a lot of people because I'm a big fan of Bruce Springsteen. I really am. God knows how many Bruce Springsteen albums I have. Probably 80 with bootlegs and things like that. The album I'm going to choose is an album that I really like. I like it. But I don't think it's great. I don't think it's amazing. I think it, kind of like that Black Star album, it was really, really a courageous move to do. And what I'm talking about is Nebraska by Bruce Springsteen. And hear me out. I really like a lot of these songs. You know, I really do. I mean, I know every one of these songs on there. And it's a fine listen. And of course, he put this out after The River because he was now becoming a superstar. And he wanted to put the brakes on his career. Until 3 years later when he put out Born in the USA and became godlike. But I like Nebraska. I really do. I just don't think it's like an ultimate 5-star classic that should be at the top of everybody's list. And a lot of people say this is his best album or amongst his best albums, and I don't even think I never really listened to it. If I listen to it, I enjoy it. I think the Atlantic City is amazing. A lot of these songs are really good. I like when he does some of them with the band. It's not my least favorite Springsteen album. I think this album, I enjoy Nebraska a million times more than the Ghost of Tom Joad album. I enjoy it a million times more than the Devils and Dust album. Springsteen's interesting with me. As much as I love him, I don't love all of his albums. That's the funny part. I really don't. I'm going to put Bruce Springsteen here with Nebraska because I like it, but I think it's overrated. You know, I would never put that as a 5-star classic. I'd put it as a 5-star gutsy move, but it doesn't make the album amazing. All right, let's keep going. Let's do some vinyl. So we're getting out of alphabetical order now. We're going to do this one. This is Nirvana on vinyl, Nevermind. Now, in order for an album to make it into my catalog and database and on the shelves, I got to listen to it at least 5 times. I still haven't heard this album 5 times. It's definitely not a bad album. The loud and the softness, the classic Nirvana sound. Smells Like Teen Spirit is overplayed, but great. In Bloom, Come As You Are, of course, Lithium. Um, I'm not saying it's a bad album. I just don't know why it's as great as so many people say it is. And I kind of like Nirvana. They're a work in progress for me. I got this box set like, I don't know, a year and a half ago, and I still haven't been able to get all the way through it. So maybe for me, Nirvana in general is just an overplayed act in general. But, I do play the Unplugged album a lot, and then I have like a best of, which I'll throw on once in a while. So they were work in progress for me. I thoroughly admit that. But Nevermind, to me, at least for me, is overrated. Cool album cover. Everything about this album is gutsy. But it's not an album that I just think is like an all-time great, which is what a lot of people place it as. All right, let's go to this guy. He definitely is overrated, and I am talking about his solo career. I am talking about Roger Waters. You could pick just about any Roger Waters album. And I have all of them. Here's his debut album, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. Man, this is not an easy listen. It's very Roger Waters. 40 minutes or whatever. It just slogs you through. It's got the same feel, the same monotony going through it. I think there's one or two songs that actually have a melody that kind of may grab you a little bit. But this is a lot of his career is just like a slog. Let's keep going. Radio Chaos I thought was a bit better. But also not too much in the way of songs that really, really grabbed me. But I thought it was better than Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. Then he did Amused to Death. Amused to Death to me is the exception. I think Amused to Death is incredible. Incredible. I actually, if it was a Pink Floyd album, it would be up there with Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and Animals. And I guess The Wall. Well, I don't think The Wall's as good as those. This album is amazing. So, it's not totally Roger Waters' complete career. But that was it. Then he did the In the Flesh tour. I saw that live. It's incredible. This is like a best of, which is pretty good. It picks out some of the best stuff from these albums and then a couple of covers. And then the last one I got from him, Is This the Life We Really Want? I saw that tour too. And man, this album's also a slog. Just that's the only way I could describe his music. It just doesn't. His music is monotonous. It doesn't have melody. It doesn't grab me. It just kind of goes on, and that's a problem. That's Roger Waters. And if anybody, that's a really good example of like why a band shouldn't have broken up, because you clearly needed David Gilmour for the melodies and the parts of the song that grab you, in my opinion. And Roger Waters' solo career, except for Amused to Death, is that in spades. It desperately is crying out for somebody to give you something to grab onto to hook you. So that's what I would say about Roger Waters. You could pick any of his albums as overrated, except for Amused to Death. I got Hitchhiker right there. Next up might surprise some people, but I've tried it, and it's Stevie Wonder. In the 70s, Stevie Wonder, every year you'd watch the Grammys back then before it was what it was now, and he would win every year for best album of the year. And, Talking Book, I really enjoyed Talking Book. I got it back then, and I really enjoyed Inner Visions. Some really great tracks, and not all great, but certainly, the guy's an artistic genius. I mean, let's state the obvious. He's blind. He can play every instrument. He plays the drums better than I do. I mean, not that I'm such a great drummer, but I mean, the guy is a talent beyond belief. But then when he released Songs in the Key of Life, this was a double album. Plus, I think it had a extra vinyl in there, 45 or something like that. It's all on this 2-disc set. And to this day, I can't get through this album. It's just too much. It's just too long, too much of the same vibe. And the amount of songs in there that I think are incredible, like Sir Duke or I Wish, it's spread out amongst such a long album that it's just a slog. So I'm not again saying this is a really good album, but do I think it's amongst the greatest albums of all time? Not for me. So Songs in the Key of Life from Stevie Wonder, yep, I'm going to put that up there as much as he is a genius, and I'm not saying Stevie Wonder is not a genius. I'm just saying there's just too much on that album for my taste. Too little that's amazingly great. Um, it's just not easy for me. So there we're going to go that. I got two more left. One, I want to know what your opinion is. And we're going to be talking about, this is a guy's career that I think is really, really overrated. So hear me out. George Harrison of the Beatles. You're right. Now, I'm not saying George Harrison is not great. And over his career, if you choose the best of his songs, yeah, it's pretty damn good. But if you look at his actual individual albums, man, you talk about an inconsistent, spotty career. Some of it is downright dreadful. Now, before you kick your screen in and beat me up, I know that All Things Must Pass is one of the greatest albums of all time. It's a damn near perfect album. Well, the two discs are. The third jamming disc, yeah, I don't know who's really listening to that much. And I know the Concert for Bangladesh is one of the greatest concerts, and in fact, one of the greatest live albums of all time. In fact, it's near amongst the top of my video for best live albums of all time. But it's George Harrison and friends. George Harrison is not the highlight on Bangladesh. He just does good performances of a few of his songs. Really good performances because he's got a great band. But it's not a George Harrison concert. You got this album, Living in the Material World. There's a deluxe edition. This is about as close, in my opinion, as he gets to another really good album. But again, this is pretty spotty stuff. You know, Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth is incredible. A couple other really good songs on here. But it's a really inconsistent album, and yet that's possibly the best one out of all these other ones that I'm about to show you. Now, if you go through, and I don't even have every George Harrison album. Here's an example. So his early career is really a mixed bag. I mean, if you're a big George Harrison fan, you're going to admit to me that you listen to Dark Horse or Extra Texture or those albums a lot. I tend to doubt it. And his first greatest hits album is this one. You want to talk offensive? The first half of it was Beatles songs. And then the second half of it was some of his solo stuff, which was pretty inconsistent. Dark Horse, you know, You. Are these really amazing songs? No. The best tracks here are the Beatles songs. And you know what? They're Beatles songs. They don't put them as George Harrison songs, because then Mick Jagger and Keith Richards should be in the Hall of Fame, because George Harrison's in the Hall of Fame. They should be in the Hall of Fame too because of their songwriting abilities. This is Beatles songs, not solo George Harrison, even though he wrote it. So that's a cheat. Totally pisses me off, as you could tell. I mean, the best songs on this album are Beatle tracks, and that's the best of George Harrison. That's messed up, because the rest of his solo stuff is nyeh. Now, when he went to his own label, and you can go through his albums, here's 33 1/3. Yeah, it's got Cracker Box, Palace. You know, it's okay. You know, he's got some decent songs on this album. And then you got the self-titled, which I actually think is possibly his best album. I really like this album. That's a good one. Not amazing, but it's really good. And then you got Somewhere in England. Well, that's okay. These are all okay. And then you got Gone Tropo. Oh, yeah. Great stuff, right? I'm kidding. It's okay. What else have we got? Cloud 9, which was a huge hit. You know, I hate that damn song. Got My Mind Set on You, which was a cover. Ugh. But, you know, it's got a couple of decent songs. I don't even like When We Was Fab, and Devil's Radio's okay, and Cloud 9. You know, I just think that George Harrison is just so damn overrated as a solo artist. And my bet is this. If he was not in the Beatles, would he be in the Hall of Fame as a solo artist? No. He wouldn't even be known that well. I'm telling you. He would just be okay. This is a decent live album he did with with Eric Clapton's band. It's okay. Not exactly the best live performer, was he? Here you go. Here's Let It Roll. This is his latter-day greatest hits. and it's just really okay. This is the best that you're going to get if you want to get his best of his solo stuff. But really, All Things Must Pass is one of the great albums. Other than that, God knows, George Harrison is so overrated. He really, really is. And that's at least my opinion, not so humble. I mean, it's just ridiculous. All right, I got one more. And this one will be a quick one because I don't even own the album. And everything I do is about what I own. But I sort of own it. We're talking Captain Beefheart and Trout Mask Replica? Whatever the hell it is. Trout Mask Replica. An album that I bought and tried to get through, and I couldn't even get through it. I understand Avant-Garde, and I have a bunch of Frank Zappa albums, and he probably could have been in here to a certain extent. But I just found Trout Mask Replica an experimental mess, and certainly not an enjoyable listen. And the fact that critics and people put that up on the top of like greatest albums of all time is just shenanigans, man. Is that the word? That's ridiculous. So why am I showing you this? This is an old Warner Brothers compilation that they would put out of releases, upcoming releases. And yeah, Trout Mask Replica's got some stuff in here. So officially, I still have some of it in my collection. And when I listen to this thing, which is not too often, I'm certainly skipping over Trout Mask Replica. So there you have it. Overrated artists, overrated albums, 10 of them. My choices: Black Star from Bowie, If I Could Only Remember My Name from David Crosby, Electric Light Orchestra, Out of the Blue, Not at the Opera, but really the whole Queen career, After Weeks from Van Morrison, Exile in Guyville from Liz Phair, Bruce Springsteen, Nebraska. But yeah, I could have put in, because that's such a highly rated album. George Harrison's basically his whole solo career except for All Things Must Pass on Bangladesh. Roger Waters' whole solo career except for Amused to Death. Nirvana, Nevermind. Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life. Trout Mask Replica from Captain Beefheart. And that should cover it. Let me know what you think. Hope you enjoyed this video. These are my choices and would love to know what you think. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy. If you're new to my channel, please hit subscribe. Help my little channel to grow. It's growing. I got some amazing viewers who watch pretty much every video and they comment. We got a little community going, and I want that to keep building. I actually love when you guys write each other, and I just watch sometimes and chip in a little comment. So I love it. Thank you so much again. I will see you next time on the Alan Rosenberg Show.